Welcome back to the Masters of Materium podcast. My name is Virtual. I'm here with Grill and Elam. How's it going, boys?
It's going good. Happy holidays. Glad to be here again and talk about some halflings.
How's the holiday spirit in Thailand, Elam?
There's quite a lot of people actually coming here. I was outside walking down the boardwalk yesterday and it was packed here, and a lot of people, tourists and people, dressed up with Christmas type themes. So it's not something you usually see here.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about halflings today. If you haven't checked out our podcast on humans, dwarves, and orcs, make sure you check those out. And yeah, let's get into it, Grill.
All right. I'll start off with the EVENSTRIDES. All right. The EVENSTRIDES. A lesser known aspect of the halflings are the EVENSTRIDES, a clan that excels at running up and down hills. The EVENSTRIDES are a fun clan to play as due to their unique ability to run up slopes despite being so small. Are shorter than most humans, these movement specialists are able to create the most efficient method of running no matter the terrain. They can almost always outrun humans and orcs in both sprint speed and endurance. EVENSTRIDES can use running as a way of getting around because they have great balance and can manage their weight distribution. As exemplars, EVENSTRIDES are able to run with less energy costs due to the swiftness trait, which allows them to operate at full speeds for a greater duration.
Elam, get us started.
Yeah, so the EVENSTRIDES, and if anyone's played Valheim, there's a buff known as the Eikthyr buff, and it's, arguably the most powerful buff in the game to choose for a power. And the EVENSTRIDES essentially have that buff up, 24/7, which makes them incredibly powerful. Initially, just listening to the description, having less energy cost doesn't sound like it's all that important, but you'll find when you're trying to kite mobs around or you're trying to get from point A to point B, the ability to constantly be moving faster for a long duration is incredibly powerful. So I think this is potentially a very powerful exemplar, and one that probably is more or less getting overlooked by many people. Certainly looking on OpenSea over a period of time, the EVENSTRIDES haven't been performing very well from a price perspective. And I think once game launch, you'll see the demand for EVENSTRIDES increasing over their current demand.
Yeah, I was about to say these guys are the pit fighters of halflings, but you're starting to change my mind a little bit. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, listen to the Human Exemplar podcast because we're throwing pit fighters under the bus. A couple of potential use cases for them that I was thinking of. One is, if their agility is just another level, it could be huge in combat, right? If you can just move around creatures and just outmaneuver them, could be very powerful. The second use case I was thinking of is, what if there's creatures that you just can't outrun? They're just too fast. Maybe this is the only exemplar that will run fast enough, long enough to actually be able to outrun them without a horse. So those are a couple of use cases. Grill?
Yeah, they might have access to parts of the game that other people can't because of their ability to cover greater distances on the same amount of energy. They could also be like a courier, possibly, either within large establishments or over small distances where it doesn't make sense to use a horse or any other means of transportation.
One thing, too, I'm thinking of just based on the long description is, can these guys climb mountains that other exemplars can't? Because it's talking about running up hills and stuff. So that would be a massive potential utility if there's specific areas that only the EVENSTRIDES could get to because only they could climb up. So I'm just speculating there, but possible. Elam, any other final thoughts?
Yeah, so in terms of movement in the playtest for the Goblin Meadows, jumping versus running had different energy requirements, and this particular exemplar only describes energy reduction while running. So I'm not sure if it would apply to jumping, which is essentially climbing. At least at this point in the game, you can't climb in the Legend of Zelda style. So I'm not sure how that would work per se.
Go to the next one.
All right, up next, we have the LONGSONGS. The smallest people on Mirandus are the little folk or halflings. They are the happiest of Mirandus' inhabitants since they make up the majority of its writers, storytellers, and musicians. They prefer to live quiet existences so that they may create beautiful things without being distracted by a chaotic world. The tales and songs of Mirandus are full of folklore who play a part in every story. The Longsongs have excelled at music and are the most accomplished among them. It is said that the Longsongs hide tremendous magic within their songs and that the elders may cast spells from sound. The bonus of Halfling Longsongs is that when they play music, they receive a reduction in energy cost for spells.
Yellow.
So this particular exemplar is one that I hold a lot of. I actually have more than twice the supply of the next highest asset holder, and that's mostly related to me playing multiple other games where birds are really popular and powerful. Final Fantasy 14, Lord of the Rings Online, Ion, etc. And the thing about this bird type class is when they're in a group type setting, an additional bird can be worth, multiple extra characters in the amount of additional benefit that they provide to their teammates, like providing a DPS, extra DPS, providing the healer, better energy regeneration so they can cast more spells, damage reduction to the tanks, etc. So again, probably a somewhat under-respected exemplar, one that typically doesn't work all that well alone. So probably one of the worst exemplars to solo with, but in a group and certainly a raid type setting, if their music, goes to the entire raid, this would be an incredibly powerful exemplar. The other thing that I've noticed with regards to energy reduction playing music, some people have thought that energy reduction might be applied to people around them as well, which would be incredibly powerful. My personal thought is just that they can play music with less energy than others. And I wouldn't even be surprised if they make it so they're the only people that can play music. Why I say that is because Michael McCarthy more recently has been making it so that some of the exemplars are more unique, like the cartographers being the only people that can make maps, etc. So I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing Longsongs as like the only exemplars playing music, and that would provide even more utility and benefit to this particular exemplar.
Yeah, I was sleeping on this one until I saw the magic, lowered magic cost benefits. Let's talk a little bit about music in the game. Here's what we know. There will be no background music ever in Mirandus, like, kind of the classic scores, soundtracks that games would produce. It's just going to be nature. But McCarthy has said that he wants players to be able to create music in the game, which is pretty cool and exciting. I really hope that they have a digital music creating software, which wouldn't be too hard to do, with a bunch of medieval instruments. I'm assuming people could create songs using this MIDI music technology, pick the instruments, and then there's a song created. We need Moro, who's one of our brothers, to create some dark, sad Mirandus songs. But I'm thinking maybe the songs will be NFTs, which would be pretty cool, and maybe the taverns could play these songs in the background for Materium. Maybe just like song writers get usually at 7-8 cents per song played when it's played on the radio. Could be like one Materium every time a song's played, something like that. Anyways, just some interesting thoughts, but go ahead, Grill.
I'm with Alan. Playing a bunch of other MMOs, you see that support classes are just generally pretty overpowered. Between buffs, debuffs, potentially control on mobs, I see them being pretty much a part of every raid group or hunting group, from a couple people up to hundreds, possibly, depending on how big they want some of these world bosses to be. I really think this is probably the most underrated class and undervalued class in probably the entire game.
Nice. Let's go to the next one.
Up next, the MUMSENDS. Deep in the hilly Halfling region, there is a little-known hamlet known as Mumsend, which sometimes is called the Quiet Village. The inhabitants of this tight-knit neighborhood are mostly members of the clan known as the MUMSENDS. These halflings are generally perceptive spectators who seldom speak. The MUMSENDS' ability to move silently is one of a kind. In other words, the MUMSENDS are masters in the field of creeping up without being noticed. Within their community, society is designed around individuals who are particularly good at not only sneaking up on others, but also avoiding being sneaked up upon themselves. Whisper is the game that determines public standing in Mumsend. And while it may appear to be a silly game, the outcomes are enforceable across the town. Whisper has a complex set of rules, but the basic idea is that Mumsends try to sneak up on their pals and neighbors and scare them out of their minds with a quiet greeting. Those who elicit the most startles earn the greatest degrees of respect from society. For many Mumsends, the game has significant impact on their lives, for better or worse. The Mumsends are known for moving in almost complete silence, thanks to their trait called stilled passage.
This description makes them sound like assholes. They just surprise people.
Yeah, pretty much. Sneak up behind us, go boo. Let's see. Mumsends are known for moving in almost complete silence, thanks to their trait called stilled passage. This can allow them to sneak into areas filled with dangerous creatures or to pick pockets, make it a bit easier for them to line their purses.
Elam?
So the stealthy kind of class is not the class I kind of typically play. However, there's quite a few significant benefits to this particular exemplar, and another one that just recently came up. So I'm going to talk about the more recent thing first. In Discord, they've been talking about loot, and one of the things with loot is if loot's on the ground, they can be picked up by other players after a period of time. And we also know that sound will be significant in the game, whether that be the sound from, alerting you of that other players are nearby, or sound that, tracks monsters via their aggro radius. I could see Mumsens kind of, lying in wait and watching some mobs get, killed and such. And then when they're not noticed, sneaking in and stealing other people's loot directly. Other than, of course, the pickpocketing, as they mentioned as well, from mobs. That would be very similar to the WoW's rogue ability pickpocket. And potentially getting into areas that are full with mobs that you couldn't typically defeat, or even mobs that are, invincible mobs that you would, only way that you would able to acquire, say, some treasure would be to be able to sneak by them to pick the chest or what have you. So these are, again, kind of a niche type class. Not my personal style, but I can see some people really liking this particular exemplar.
On the pickpocket thing, do you think you're going to be able to pickpocket creatures? Like, do goblins have Materium in their pockets?
So in WoW, any humanoid type creature, you can sneak up to them and pickpocket, and they have a separate loot table for pickpocketing, and some really rare and unique items that can only be acquired via pickpocketing quests and such as well. So it's certainly possible.
Interesting. Yeah, I think the Mumsend and the Neverlook, which we'll do next, are very similar in their features and functions and utility. I mean, one of the big ones is that if somebody becomes fluent in Goblin and uses the Mumsends or the Neverlooks to listen, they could actually pick up some incredibly valuable secrets. So that's an interesting use case for them. Grill?
Not too much more to add. Nice possible rogue or assassin class. Maybe they get some kind of crit bonuses for sneaking up on things and hitting them from behind. Pickpocketing, like I almost said. It seems kind of like how they're setting this class up.
I think it'd be really cool, as Alan mentioned, where there's going to be certain situations in the game, there's only one exemplar that can achieve the mission or the goal, whether it's, in this case, maybe like Alan described, there's an area that's so dangerous that it's almost impossible to go there and defeat them. You have to sneak in to steal the treasure or get the NFT or whatever. So potential interesting use case there. Next one.
Next, we'll do the Neverlook. The Neverlooks. Eavesdropping and hiding brings the Neverlooks great pride. To them, a conversation overheard is meant to be shared and profited from. If crouched and motionless, you are almost invisible. That's it. That's the whole description.
Okay.
It's really short for this one.
Alan?
Yeah, I was like, okay, continue. No, but so the Neverlooks, interestingly enough, were kind of released at the point where people were kind of spending enough of their money into exemplars where no one really wanted to buy any other, but just before the market started going absolutely crazy. So I used to call the Neverlooks the never sells because they were up on the store for so long. But specifically with the Neverlooks, their ability sounds very similar to the vanilla WoW's version of Shadow Meld. So when you're not moving, you can be completely stealthed, but moving, like the rogue in WoW, would break your stealth. So that would make them not the ideal rogue, but better as kind of like maybe a vanish trying to get out of combat, or potentially as Virtual saying with regards to listening in on conversations and stuff. These guys would be quite useful, but the inability to stay stealth while moving is a major drawback. I would hope at some point, maybe in their mastery tree, the duration that they can stay stealth, or they can get some movement, even if it's at like a movement reduction penalty or what have you, would be acquired. Otherwise, that quite limits their ability. I don't really have anything else about this class particularly.
Well, there's a big thing we haven't talked about, which is if proximity chat is active in the game, which I'm assuming it's going to be. What if you're using the Neverlooks to literally try to sneak up on another team, another guild, and just listen in, right? I mean, you could hide, listen in, they can't see you, maybe pick up some valuable information. So obviously it could be used against us as well, but interesting potential use case. What's your thoughts on this, Grill?
To expand on that, they could maybe some of the NPCs will speak, and they'll talk about some treasure in another area, and you'll never actually say that unless there was Neverlook stealth nearby. They could also be like scouts. They can run through dangerous areas, drop aggro, and take a look around, or get through those areas completely, where normally you wouldn't be able to do that.
Ilum, do you think that's going to be a thing, basically spying on other raiding teams?
Considering there's money involved and potentially acquiring, this data could have significant value, I wouldn't be surprised at all if you see people doing, or not, in quotes, not seeing people use their Neverlooks for that reason. But that's definitely a possibility for sure.
That'll be, I'm assuming, bypassable if you're using, like, for example, with the PlayStation, you can use Discord to speak and nobody can pick up your audio. So probably some ways to prevent that, but interesting. Let's get to the last one.
Okay, last but not least, the Proudhearth. The tiny people of the world, known as little folk, are also known for their great pleasure and appreciation in eating and drinking. These characteristics are rather odd for a race that is much smaller than humans, yet they are real. The most talented halfling chefs are revered in much the same way that royal families are in other countries, and their cuisine is suitable for any Mirandus king. The Proudhearths are known as the greatest chefs among halflings. A Proudhearth's culinary specialty is preparing a vast meal in a record time, no matter how many people are involved. It is claimed that even with just a few ingredients, a Proudhearth can prepare an extravagant multi-dish dinner that will be remembered fondly by the entire party for the rest of their lives. Hearthmasters is the Proudhearth's trait that reduces energy cost of cooking and brewing.
Ayla, maybe talk a little bit about the entire food dynamics within Mirandus, just for people that might not be familiar with it. And then you can talk about Proudhearths.
Yeah, so food, first off, comes from a bunch of different chains. So you have on your ranching side, you have your dairy and butchery chain. On the farming side, you have your brewery and bakery chain. And each of those buildings will be able to make products that could potentially be used for what I'm calling snacks, but they're in-game, they'll be considered traveling rations, and or using those components to make hot meals, which is kind of the ultimate long-lasting food buff, which would be served in taverns and higher tier inns. And the Proudhearth, being the only legendary tier crafting class, where most crafting classes are only rare tier, Of all the buildings in the game, this particular exemplar has the most or largest footprint associated with buildings. For example, let's say like a weaver. A weaver would be typically associated with an outfitter. However, the Proudhearth would be associated with, you know, all the food buildings plus inns and taverns. So honestly, I don't think there's anywhere near enough Proudhearths in the game to supply all the places that are associated with them. Another thing with Proudhearths I should mention is that this is another one of the exemplars that I own, you know, more than twice the next highest person. So obviously I'm pretty bullish on Proudhearths. The fact that Mom Guild is built around food production and these are the people that cook food, obviously this is going to be a very important exemplar in the game. My personal thought is they would probably be just behind Dark Suns in terms of the most useful and versatile exemplar as well. I should mention the original description mentioned that they could make incredible foods very quickly. And more recently in Discord, Michael McCarthy has mentioned that crafting time for items will be very, very short, somewhere along the lines of about 5 seconds. However, that will then be converted into producing you know, more quality or potentially larger amounts of foods. So instead of, for say, making, you know, 1 loaf of bread, maybe they can proc a chance and make like, you know, 2 loaves of bread, or maybe they can make a, you know, a higher tier bread that they could use for, you know, additional buffs or what have you. The other thing that I should mention with regards to Proudhearths is talking again about the different tiers. So most exemplars for crafting are rare tier. There's only one epic tier exemplar, that's the Iron Shaper, that's for crafting. And then this is the highest tier crafting exemplar of all of them, as the elves are non-crafting. So quite unique in terms of their particular abilities.
Yeah, Mom owns over 12.5% of the entire supply, which, by the way, an interesting little side note that we didn't mention is the only classes that are completely sold out in the Gala store for exemplars is elves and halflings. So if you're interested in buying one, you got to go to OpenSea. Yeah, no, I think it's going to be interesting. One thing too that description kind of outlines is that if you're lacking materials, you'll be able to use Materium to finish a recipe, which is something McCarthy has mentioned before, not just for food, but for other things. And the way to describe it, potentially maybe there's a buff there. Maybe you won't need to spend as much Materium to finish a recipe. But that being said, since we own all of the farms and the hamlets that we do, I don't think we'll have too many issues with the raw materials. Grill, thoughts?
They're terrible. Don't buy them. Send them all to Mom.
Great advice.
Yeah, no, they're pretty self-explanatory. Like, as Alem said, they're going to be the chefs, and they're going to be incredibly important to the game. And I agree with him that I don't think there's nearly enough.
Awesome. Well, that concludes our podcast on halflings. Again, if you're serious about Mirandus, I don't think you're going to find a better guild than the Masters of Materium, known as MOMS. Go to mastersofmaterium.com. Join our Discord. Joining our guild super easy. You'll get instructions when you come in. Basically, just send your wallet to Alem, and that's it. So we're open for business. Looking for members of all types, whether you own an exemplar or even if you don't, you own a building, you own a deed. Join us. We're here to dominate. Alem, final thoughts?
Yeah, so the halflings, as you can probably know from my holdings, is one of my most interesting exemplars. It kind of, you know, the Frodo Baggins of Lord of the Rings or Bilbo Baggins or what have you. So I very much like the halflings and looking forward again to pushing on to the elves here.
Yeah, Alem's got 61 halflings, so he loves them. Grill, thoughts?
Not much else. Enjoy your holidays. Like and subscribe. Gently push the button, right? Is that what we established? No smashing?
Yeah, please don't smash the button, and it's not good for your phone. Just gently touch it, tap it. That's all you got to do. Awesome. Thanks, boys.
Take care.